Hey everyone, today I'm going to be drawing Batman and kind of showing you how I started drawing of a person, and today we're going to be turning it into Batman. So I hope you have a sketchbook or some kind of drawing device that you can grab and you can draw along with me. So the first thing I like to do when I'm starting a drawing of a person is I start with the head, and all that is it starts off as just a circle, and this will be the top part of the head. Then I like to figure out which way that person is going to be looking, and for Batman today we're going to do a 3/4 view. So then I like to draw where the middle of the front of his face is going to be. Then after I figured out kind of where the top of the head is going to be and where he's looking, then I fill in kind of where the chin and jaw is going to go. And then about halfway down, we'll draw a line for where the eyes are going to be. And then halfway down from the eyes to the chin, draw where the nose is going to be. And then about halfway down from there is where the mouth is going to be. So this is the same for any drawing of a head that I'm gonna do. And then I fill in kind of like the brow and the jaw, and since this is Batman and he has a big chin and strong jawline, I'm gonna give him an exaggerated chin. Right like that, come in, give him a little spot for an ear. And kind of fill in the rest of his head. Alright, so now that we got everything kind of mapped out, I'm going to give him a neck, and the neck's going to come out right from the base of the skull here. And I think today I'm going to draw Batman kind of long and thin. So I'm going to give him that long, thin neck, and then it's going to come right down into his chest. And it's kind of the same thing. I draw a big oval for his chest, and then his shoulders are smaller ovals. And once you've figured out where he's facing, I want his body to be facing the same direction that his head is. So on the front of his chest, I'm going to kind of draw that same line that I did on the front of his face, but on his chest, and that'll kind of help me find where the middle of his body is going to be, the middle of his torso. And I think I actually want to make his chest a little bit bigger and his shoulders a little bit wider, because he's pretty strong. So then I like to map out the ears pretty early on, because it's Batman and it kind of gives you the feeling of what he's gonna look like, sets the mood for the drawing. And since I'm doing kind of a longer, leaner Batman, I'm gonna give him those really tall, thin ears. And now this sketch might end up looking a little bit more like how my style of a Batman would look, but if you want to draw shorter ears or bigger eyes, smaller, whatever, go for it. Make this look like your Batman and not necessarily mine. So I think I'm going to push that chin out even farther. We're going to make him a little cartoony. I usually like to draw my characters a little more cartoony and exaggerate some things, just because I think it gives them a little more character and a little bit more life. So we're going to draw these eyes, and he's going to be almost kind of squinty, like he's looking out over Gotham. Furrowed brow. So once I figure out the eyes and where those are going to go, how they're going to look, then I like to do the nose. So then the nose, and in a 3/4 view, just comes right down like this from the eyes. So I find the middle of the eyes, which would be right about here, and I come down and form kind of a pointed nose, because it's Batman. It's kind of part of his mask, kind of his look. So we'll fill in the edge there, and then I like to go straight into the mask, which does something a little bit like this. It's easy, because once you draw the nose, you can kind of just follow that straight across his head and start forming that mask. And actually, I want to form the silhouette of his head a little more, so I'm actually going to poke his nose out beyond his face. Try to make him not look like Pinocchio with his big nose, but pull out a little bit. And actually, let's tuck this in and keep that jaw nice and huge. Now Batman always has that kind of grumpy, pouty look on his face, so we're gonna kind of give him this little, just for his mouth, just a little one of those. That's all he needs. And then, since he's wearing a mask, you're not really gonna see too much of his ear, but we'll fill that in a little bit. Bring the neck down. And now, with that big brow, and especially if it's furrowed, that's going to cause a lot of shadows to be under his eyes. So that's going to be really dark in that. As you can see, I keep filling in shadows in there. It's going to be really dark from the light getting blocked by his eyebrows. And the same with under the nose. There's going to be a lot of shadow under here. And my light source is going to be coming in from the top left. I'm not sure why, but that always seems to be my go-to for a light source whenever I'm just sketching in my sketchbook. If I don't have anything particularly planned out, I usually go for the upper left, and that's what I'm going to be doing here today. So that means this bat ear would be completely dark, it's in shadow, and this one would be dark, it's also in shadow, and this side of his head would be in shadow, and then this all would be in shadow. So once I get kind of a good outline for his head and where his body's going and everything, I like to add the cape, because just like the ears, I think it's a quick way to give him a lot of character. Now what I like to do is kind of draw out from the center these lines that just kind of go towards his shoulders. If the cape's going behind the shoulders, I just draw straight to the shoulders. And I kind of finish it off with these triangle shapes that kind of just form simple shapes to create his cape. And actually, and this is the beauty of drawing digitally, if you're drawing in your sketchbook you can't quite do this, but as I was showing you guys how to draw the head, I think I was exaggerating how large I was drawing it, so I actually don't want it to be quite that big, so I'm gonna select it and shrink it up just a little bit. Not too much, because I don't think it was too far off, but just a little bit. Because I also want his muscles to look big and strong, and also a little bit exaggerated as well, because he's a cartoon superhero, so we've got to make him look bulky and strong. So I'm just going to pull that back in. There, that looks a little more reasonable. That head was just a little too big. And again, I'm going to fill in these shadows under the jaw, because with the light coming in like this, it's going to hit, and his head is going to block everything down here. It's going to be really dark. Give him an Adam's apple. It's going to be really dark under the jawline. So then let's fill out a little more of his body. A back, these big arms, the biceps, the shoulders that are going into the pec muscles here. Bicep coming out of the shoulder, coming down that way. Rest of the arms filling in there. And we'll bring his waist down. There, so we kind of filled in the outline of his body, mostly. And let's see here, his cape's falling down. It's gonna fall right there. And then obviously the inside of his cape is gonna be all in shadow because no light is gonna be able to get to it. So we'll fill that in. Right like that. And then this cape over here is gonna be all the way over. So this whole thing is going to be dark. Right like that. And then our Batman's coming together, but he's missing something pretty important and pretty iconic right now. And obviously that's the Bat logo on his chest. So what I like to do, you find the middle of the chest, and then this will be the top of the bat ears, and I just bring that part down, and then I draw these two kind of hook parts that come out like that, and then the top of the wings that kind of make that shape, and then it's 1, 2 loops underneath into that bottom point. So 1, 2, and it's under the bottom point there. And that's kind of how I like to form the wings. There's several different styles of the Bat logo. That is kind of my favorite. And then once you kind of create the silhouette, you can just fill it in. Because it's almost always dark on his costume. I think on some costumes he has like a dark gray with a light bat signal, or maybe gold or something like that, but you can usually fill it in with a dark color, and that's pretty standard. There, so our sketch is coming together nicely. Let's fill in, make his mask a little bit darker. And if I'm going a little bit too fast for you, you can pause at any time and kind of see where I move on to next. Once I fill in the basic outline, I kind of jump around all over the page as I'm putting in my drawing, because I'll see something that doesn't look quite as finished as somewhere else, and then I'll come back to another part. And that's just kind of how I typically do it. I fill in the skeleton, and then I just kind of jump around to whatever I feel like working on or drawing at the time. So I'm going to fill out the head a little bit more with these shadows. Under the jaw, I want to make that darker. That probably will be the darkest spot. Under the jaw, under the eyes here, and in this cape are going to be your darkest spots, because that's where the light is really going to be blocked the most. And you want to build up those values. You want a wide range of values so that your drawing doesn't look flat. So don't be afraid to have 1 or 2 spots that are really super dark, and then a bunch that are just varying levels of darkness. It's good to have that. It helps your drawing look more three-dimensional. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with that base drawing, and I think I'm going to ink this. Now, if you're doing this in your sketchbook, go ahead and grab like a pen or a marker, a black marker. And what you can do is, since I'm doing this digitally, of course I can just drop the opacity of the layer that I'm working on, and then I can ink on a layer above it. But if you are drawing in your sketchbook, go ahead and take your eraser and lightly erase. Don't erase hard because you don't want to get rid of what you're working on, but you want to kind of be able to see what you're inking on top of. So now that I've dropped the opacity, I'm going to grab my inking pen, and if I'm inking traditionally, I really like to use a brush pen. So I have a couple digital pens that act similarly to a brush pen that I would use in my sketchbook. So I like to grab that, and then I just start. And if you are inking traditionally, just be careful not to smudge what you've already done as you go along. And then you just kind of go on top of the lines and shapes that you've already created. And hopefully you have some nice clean lines and shapes, so it makes inking on top easier. And if you don't want to ink, if you just want to keep your pencil sketch, of course that's completely fine too. A lot of people do that, especially if you're just doing it for fun or practice. You can stop there, but I usually like to finish my drawings with ink because, in my opinion, it just makes them look a little more like a final product. So what I like about the brush pens, and as you can see kind of how this pen reacts digitally, is the line width variation, because I can get thick lines where I want there to be kind of heavier shadow areas, and then the thin lines where there's maybe a little bit of a highlight, but I still want to create some form and a little bit of a shape. And I always thought that the line width variation just gave your illustration a little bit more interest, kind of brings it to life just a little bit more, creates a more interesting picture for the audience to look at. And it's also a very comic booky technique, which I really like and enjoy. So for example, as I come down to the bottom of the shadow of the shoulder, I like to get a really thick line as it goes from thin to thick into where that shadow would be. So it looks cool, and it helps you build out the form of your shape. So the same with this pec muscle. Thin to thick, it's going to be nice and thick under that muscle because there's not going to be much light going to it. Same with there and there. Some other great pens that are good to use are the micron pens. And if you're familiar with drawing and inking at all, you've probably come across them. But they're really great for cross-hatching, stippling. They give you more of a smooth, consistent line. as opposed to like a brush pen or a varied line pen. But I found those to be really nice and consistent pens. They're really great. I used to do a lot of stippling work, and those are the pens that I would use, and they worked awesome for that, and they last forever. You buy a small pack and you can use them. They would last me for like a year or two sometimes. But if you haven't, I would highly recommend trying out a brush pen. It's really difficult and hard at first because it takes a lot of touch and feel to get used to. When I first started, there were a lot of times where I'd lay down way too much ink and it would soak through my paper, and I would have to throw it away, and it would sometimes ruin what I thought was a pretty good pencil drawing. But I would say it was worth the experiment. It was worth all the time I put into it, because now, as I've gotten a little bit better at it, it's one of my favorite ways to ink and draw, and I get some really cool effects out of it that I don't think I ever would have, well, I know I wouldn't have ever gotten out of like just the regular micron pens or the other forms of inking that I was using. So that's another thing, to not be afraid to try different mediums and techniques, especially if it's outside your comfort zone, because it might turn into one, a really cool style, or two, just something that you really enjoy doing. If your thing is watercolors and that's all you do, maybe try some acrylics, or maybe try inking. Try a brush pen. That's something that I've never been disappointed when I have experimented and tried something new. So definitely don't be afraid to try a different style or a different medium. Some are a little more expensive than others, so that can be kind of tough, but play around with things you have around your house. Go to Michael's or some kind of art store and look at their clearance section and pick out 2 random cheap mediums, whether it's paint or markers or whatever, and just try them. Might turn out terribly, might turn out awesome, but you'll never know if you don't try. Alright, so here I go. I'm kind of filling in all the ink for this Batman. I'm liking where it's going, how it's looking. Giving these shadows under the jaw. And as you can see, I'm getting darker as I go closer towards where that really strong shadow is. So I kind of have these lighter lines outside, and they get a lot darker as they go closer to his jawline. And let's give him the nose shadows as well. Now, one of the bigger reasons of why I'm doing this digitally is because it's a lot easier to show what I'm doing on a screen as opposed to trying to film in poor lighting a sketchbook with a pencil and a pen. And I can kind of show you the same concepts and the same ideas and the same process using this. There, so I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. And then of course you could spend hours on filling in shadows and messing with your line widths and the features and all that stuff, but I think I'm pretty happy with where we're at now. And if you want to color in your picture, you can use markers or whatever medium you prefer. If you followed along and you drew with me and you drew this Batman, post it on Instagram, post it on the social media, and tag me. It's at Zachary Allen Art on Instagram, and show me what you made. I'd love to see what you came up with based on this video. So, thanks for watching.